The engagement party for Sophia Vance and Liam Sterling was a meticulously choreographed affair, a glittering tableau of understated luxury and overt social maneuvering held in the grand ballroom of the prestigious Astor Hotel. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto polished marble floors, reflecting the muted gleam of expensive silverware on tables laden with culinary artistry. For Sophia, a young woman whose elegance was as inherent as the quiet strength in her eyes, this was a bittersweet triumph. She loved Liam deeply, a sincere affection that had blossomed from shared laughter and quiet understanding, unburdened by the vast chasm of their family's differing worlds. Liam, handsome and earnest, navigated the opulent room with a nervous energy, his gaze frequently seeking Sophia, a beacon of calm amidst the storm of his family's expectations. Liam was the scion of the Sterling dynasty, a name synonymous with old money, sprawling real estate empires, and philanthropic endeavors that often served to burnish their already formidable public image. His parents, Eleanor and Richard Sterling, presided over the gathering with an almost regal air. Eleanor, sharp-featured and impeccably dressed in a silk gown that seemed spun from moonlight, possessed a chillingly polite smile that never quite reached her eyes. Richard, a man whose expansive waistline was matched only by his even more expansive ego, moved with an air of self-importance, his booming laugh echoing a little too loudly through the refined space. They viewed this union not merely as a marriage of two individuals, but as a strategic alliance, a continuation of their family's legacy, to be vetted, approved, and, if necessary, subtly molded to their exacting standards. Standing a little apart from the glittering throng, near a quiet alcove adorned with white lilies, was Elias Vance, Sophia's father. He was a man who seemed entirely out of place in such opulence, yet utterly at peace within himself. His suit, though well-maintained, was of a simple, unassuming cut, and his shoes, polished to a muted gleam, lacked the Italian leather sheen of those around him. His face was a landscape of gentle lines, etched by years of honest labor and quiet contemplation. His silver hair, thinning but neatly combed, framed a face that radiated kindness and a profound, almost ancient wisdom. Elias Vance was not a man of grand gestures or flashy displays. He was a man of substance, built on quiet dignity, hard work, and principles forged in a life lived far from the gilded cages of high society. He had arrived alone, having politely declined Liam's offer of a chauffeured car, preferring the simplicity of a taxi, a choice that had already, unbeknownst to him, set off alarm bells for the Sterlings. Eleanor Sterling, her sharp eyes missing nothing, had observed Elias's quiet arrival. She leaned conspiratorially towards her husband, a faint sneer playing on her lips. "Richard, darling, is that Sophia's father?" Her voice, though low, carried a venomous undertone. "He looks rather quaint. Wouldn't you say, almost like he's wandered in from a garden party? Not our engagement celebration." Richard chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. "Indeed, my dear. One almost expects him to pull out a gardening trowel. I do hope Sophia hasn't inherited too much of his rustic charm. Our lineage, you see, is built on a rather different foundation." He smoothed the lapel of his custom-tailored tuxedo, a gesture of self-satisfaction. Sophia, moments later, approached her father, her heart sinking slightly as she saw the Sterling's thinly veiled looks of disdain directed at him. She offered him a warm embrace, her hand reaching for his, finding comfort in the familiar strength of his touch. "Dad, are you comfortable? Can I get you anything?" she asked, her voice tinged with an unspoken apology for the discomfort she knew he must be feeling. Elias smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Perfectly. My dear, this is quite the spectacle. And your Liam, he seems like a good young man. A bit nervous, perhaps, but genuine." His calm reassurance was a balm to Sophia's frayed nerves. He had always possessed this innate ability to see beyond superficialities, to discern character where others saw only status. Their quiet moment was soon interrupted by Eleanor and Richard Sterling, who glided towards them, their smiles fixed and insincere. "Mr. Vance," Eleanor purred, extending a slender hand, her diamond rings glinting. "So glad you could make it. We were just remarking on the charming simplicity of your attire. One rarely sees such authenticity these days. The word authenticity was laced with such heavy sarcasm it was practically dripping acid. Richard Sterling clapped Elias on the shoulder, a condescending gesture that felt more like a pat to a pet. Yes, indeed, a refreshing change from all the fuss we tend to make about these affairs. Though, of course, for Liam's engagement, we felt nothing less than the best would do. You understand. His gaze swept pointedly over Elias's unassuming suit, a silent, mocking comparison to his own bespoke tailoring. Elias met their gaze with an unperturbed calm, his eyes holding a depth that seemed to see through their superficiality. Indeed, Mr. Sterling, the best is often in the eye of the beholder. Wouldn't you agree? What truly matters is the happiness of these two young people. His voice was gentle, devoid of any hint of challenge, yet his words carried a quiet, undeniable weight, a subtle defiance to their thinly veiled insults. Sophia squeezed his hand, a silent appreciation for his dignified composure. Eleanor Sterling's smile tightened, sensing the subtle pushback. Though she couldn't quite place its origin, she shifted tactics, her gaze sweeping over Sophia. Well, darling, you certainly picked a wonderful venue. Liam, and the guest list, simply impeccable. We've made sure to invite all the right people. Of course, connections are everything, aren't they, Mr. Vance? Especially when one is starting a new life, building a future. Her implication was clear. Sophia, and by extension her humble father, were gaining entry into a world they didn't inherently belong to, a world built by the Sterling's connections. Richard Sterling chuckled, his gaze drifting over Elias as if assessing a piece of antique furniture. Yes, indeed. We've ensured Liam will have every advantage. Not everyone is born with such opportunities. Mr. Vance, it takes a certain savvy to navigate these waters. He spoke slowly, emphasizing words like opportunities and savvy with a smug superiority. Sophia felt a flush creep up her neck. Her heart ached for her father, who stood there absorbing their thinly veiled condescension with remarkable grace. Liam, sensing the escalating tension, stepped forward, his hand resting protectively on Sophia's arm. Mother, father, perhaps we should circulate. There are so many guests to greet. His voice was polite, but his eyes pleaded for an end to the uncomfortable exchange. Eleanor Sterling, sensing Liam's discomfort but choosing to ignore it, merely offered a curt nod. Of course, dear. We wouldn't want to monopolize Mr. Vance's time. I'm sure he has much to take in. She cast one last, dismissive glance at Elias, before turning with a flourish, pulling Richard along to mingle with more suitable guests. As they walked away, Richard could be heard murmuring, "Honestly, Eleanor, the humble beginnings. One must wonder how much assistance Sophia will require to truly fit in." Eleanor responded with a low, sarcastic laugh, their voices fading into the general hum of the party. Sophia turned to her father, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and frustration. "Dad, I'm so sorry. They can be difficult." Elias patted her hand gently. "Do not apologize for their shortcomings, my dear. Their words reveal more about them than they do about you. Or me. True worth is not measured by the glint of crystal or the cut of a suit. It is measured by character, by kindness, and by quiet strength." His gaze was steady, his smile unwavering, but a fleeting, almost imperceptible shadow passed through his eyes, a hint of a deeper knowledge, a profound understanding of the game being played, and perhaps a quiet contemplation of how best to play his own hand when the time was right. Sophia sensed it, a flicker of something she couldn't quite grasp, but it deepened her love and respect for her unassuming father. The engagement party, a supposed celebration of love, had instead become a stark unveiling of the rift between two vastly different worlds, a prelude to the judgments and subtle mockery that would only escalate as the wedding day approached. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a gauntlet of forced civility and thinly veiled contempt. Each family gathering, every planning meeting, became a subtle battlefield where Eleanor and Richard Sterling waged a silent war of superiority, against Elias Vance. Sophia, caught in the crossfire, felt her heart ache with each barbed comment aimed at her gentle father. Liam, though well-meaning, seemed increasingly overwhelmed, his attempts to mediate often falling flat, leaving Sophia feeling isolated in her discomfort. The first major confrontation, a rather tame one by Sterling standards, occurred during a dinner at their sprawling Upper East Side penthouse. The setting was opulent antique tapestries, a roaring fireplace, and a dining table that gleamed under the soft glow of a crystal chandelier. Eleanor Sterling, draped in pearls, surveyed Elias Vance as he quietly admired a classical painting on the wall. "Mr. Vance, I trust you find our little home adequate," Eleanor purred, her voice dripping with mock sincerity. "It's certainly not as quaint as some of the places one sees outside of the city. We do try to maintain a certain standard. You understand." Her gaze lingered on Elias's simple, yet perfectly clean, dark suit, a sharp contrast to Richard's bespoke velvet smoking jacket. Elias turned, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "It is a magnificent home, Mrs. Sterling," he replied, his voice calm and even. "Full of history, I imagine. One can feel the stories within these walls." He spoke genuinely, appreciating the artistry rather than the ostentation, a nuanced observation that seemed to entirely bypass Eleanor. Richard Sterling chuckled, swirling the amber liquid in his crystal decanter. "Indeed, stories of generations of sterling success, Mr. Vance. It's quite a burden, you know, maintaining such a legacy. Not everyone is accustomed to such demands." He leaned forward, his eyes glinting. "Speaking of which, Sophia mentioned you'll be driving yourself to the wedding rehearsal dinner, rather than taking the car Liam arranged. It's quite a distance, and the traffic can be dreadful." Elias nodded. "Yes, I prefer to drive myself. It offers a certain freedom, and I enjoy the journey." Eleanor scoffed softly. Freedom, or perhaps practicality. One wouldn't want to rely on the unreliable services of city taxis, after all. Though I suppose not everyone has a private chauffeur at their disposal. Do they? Her words were veiled, but the insinuation was clear. Elias was an outsider, unfamiliar with their world of privilege. Sophia intervened, her voice a little too bright. "Dad enjoys the drive, Mother. He always has. It's his way of unwinding." She squeezed Elias's hand under the table, a silent apology for the thinly veiled barbs. Liam, sensing the escalating tension, cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should discuss the seating arrangements for the reception. Father, we still have a few difficult placements." This usually effective diversion seemed to barely register with his parents. "Oh, yes, seating," Eleanor exclaimed, momentarily distracted. "We must ensure Mr. Vance is seated with suitable company, perhaps near the less central tables. We wouldn't want him to feel overwhelmed by the sheer volume of high society." Her tone was saccharine, but her meaning was brutally clear. Elias, incredibly, merely nodded. "Whatever you deem appropriate. Mrs. Sterling, I am simply here to celebrate my daughter's happiness." His composure was unnerving, his refusal to engage in their petty games infuriating them further. They wanted a reaction, a flicker of resentment, a hint of awkwardness. He offered none. Another instance occurred during a dress fitting for Sophia at an exclusive bridal boutique. Eleanor insisted on accompanying them, ostensibly to offer advice, but primarily to highlight the perceived gulf between their families. As Sophia emerged in a breathtaking gown, Eleanor turned to Elias, who sat patiently on a plush velvet chair. "Mr. Vance, Sophia truly looks divine." "Doesn't she?" Eleanor remarked, her gaze sweeping over Elias's simple attire. "It's a pity such exquisite craftsmanship isn't always appreciated by those accustomed to more humble fabrics. This silk alone costs more than some people's entire wardrobes." Her words were a direct jab at Elias's perceived lack of wealth. Elias simply smiled. "Indeed, Mrs. Sterling, the beauty of the gown is undeniable, but true beauty, I believe, lies within the person wearing it, and Sophia shines with an inner light that no fabric, however luxurious, can diminish. His gentle response once again deflected their nastiness, leaving them feeling subtly outmaneuvered. Richard, exasperated by Elias's unflappable demeanor, decided to escalate. During a final planning meeting at the Sterling estate, surrounded by architects and caterers, he directly addressed Elias. "Mr. Vance, we've gone to great lengths to ensure this wedding is an unforgettable affair," Richard began, his voice booming slightly. "Every detail, from the imported flowers to the Michelin star catering, is of the highest caliber. Naturally, this comes with a substantial investment. We understand that not everyone is in a position to contribute at this level, and that's perfectly fine." He paused, a condescending smile playing on his lips. "But perhaps you might consider a small, symbolic gesture, a token of your family's contribution, perhaps a donation to one of Liam's charities, in lieu of a more traditional gift, if financial constraints are an issue." The implication of Elias's poverty was brazen and humiliating. Sophia gasped, her face flushing crimson. "Father Richard, that's incredibly rude." Liam, finally finding his voice, albeit a strained one, stepped forward. "Father, please, Mr. Vance's presence is gift enough, and we haven't even discussed gifts yet." Elias, however, raised a calming hand to Sophia, his eyes remaining fixed on Richard Sterling. "Mr. Sterling, your generosity in hosting this magnificent event is truly commendable," Elias said, his voice as steady as a rock. "As for a gift, rest assured, Sophia's wedding gift will be given. It will be unique, and I believe, ultimately, quite unforgettable." His words were delivered with such quiet confidence, such an unnerving lack of defensiveness, that it momentarily silenced Richard. The Sterling patriarch squinted at Elias, trying to decipher the older man's serene expression. Searching for a hint of insecurity or bravado, he found none. Only a calm, unwavering gaze that held a depth he couldn't quite fathom. Richard, accustomed to people either kowtowing or lashing out, found Elias's composure profoundly unsettling. He decided it was merely the quiet arrogance of a fool, a man too proud to admit his humble station. Eleanor, recovering her composure, sneered. "Unforgettable? You say? Well, we certainly look forward to seeing that. Mr. Vance, I do hope it's not simply a framed photograph. Though, I suppose, sentiment can be charming in its own way." Her mocking tone underscored her absolute conviction that Elias had nothing of real value to offer. Liam looked at his father, then at Elias, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. He sensed the unspoken tension, the almost palpable disdain emanating from his parents. He loved Sophia, and he genuinely respected Elias, but he felt powerless against the ingrained snobbery of his own family. He saw the subtle hurt in Sophia's eyes, even as she tried to hide it. He knew this undercurrent of animosity would inevitably surface, threatening to mar the day that was supposed to be the happiest of their lives. Elias, for his part, retreated into his quiet observation, his eyes holding a secret wisdom, a knowledge that the true measure of a man was not in the superficiality of wealth, but in the depth of his character. He waited patiently, knowing that the time for his unique gift would soon arrive, and with it, a revelation that would leave everyone, especially the arrogant Sterlings, truly stunned. The morning of the wedding dawned with an almost oppressive perfection. A cloudless sky stretched above New York City, promising a day bathed in golden sunlight. The chosen venue, the grand conservatory at the Botanical Gardens, was a marvel of glass and steel, transformed by the Sterling family's limitless budget into a floral wonderland. Thousands of white roses draped from every archway, their delicate scent mingling with the crisp, clean air. Orchestral music, chosen by Eleanor Sterling herself for its classical gravitas, floated through the space, a sophisticated counterpoint to the nervous energy that buzzed beneath the surface. Every detail screamed opulence, a testament to the Sterlings' desire for an event that would be etched into the annals of high society. Sophia, in her bridal suite, looked breathtaking. Her gown, a creation of silk and lace, flowed around her like a whisper. Yet, despite the fairy tale setting, a knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. The past weeks of subtle slights had taken their toll. She worried for her father, Elias, who had navigated the Sterling's condescension with a stoic grace that both impressed and saddened her. She knew this day, the culmination of their meticulous planning, would be the Sterling's final, most public arena for their silent mockery. Downstairs, in the receiving area, the Sterlings held court. Eleanor, resplendent in a custom-designed gown that shimmered with subtle sequins, greeted guests with an almost imperceptible air of triumph. Richard, puffing out his chest in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, gestured expansively, as if personally responsible for the sun's radiance. They moved through the crowd, basking in the glow of their carefully curated perfection, their smiles fixed, their eyes constantly scanning for any perceived imperfection. Elias Vance arrived quietly, as was his way. He wore a simple, well-fitting charcoal suit that Sophia had insisted upon, chosen not for its brand, but for its classic cut and comfort. He carried himself with an unassuming dignity, his silver hair neatly combed, his gaze warm as he greeted the few familiar faces. He saw Liam across the room, already looking slightly harried, but smiling broadly at Sophia's arriving bridesmaids. Liam, sensing Elias's presence, offered a quick, reassuring nod. Eleanor Sterling, however, spotted Elias almost immediately. Her perfect smile faltered for a fraction of a second, quickly replaced by a saccharine sweetness that was far more chilling. She drifted towards him, Richard trailing in her wake. "Ah, Mr. Vance," Eleanor purred, her voice carrying just loud enough to be heard by a small circle of influential guests nearby. "So glad you found your way. We were just discussing the simplicity of our arrangements here, rather different from the grand scale of some of the Sterling family events. Wouldn't you say?" She gestured dismissively at the soaring glass ceiling and the thousands of roses, implying that this was modest for them, but likely overwhelming for Elias. Richard Sterling chuckled, adjusting his tie. "Indeed, one does try to keep things manageable. We know not everyone is accustomed to such extravagance. We certainly wouldn't want to make anyone feel but out of place." He emphasized extravagance with a patronizing smirk, his eyes sweeping over Elias's perfectly respectable, yet undeniably unadorned suit. Elias met their gazes with his usual calm, his eyes holding an unreadable depth. "Mrs. Sterling, Mr. Sterling, the beauty of this place is truly remarkable, and I dare say, true elegance is found not in the price tag, but in the harmony of its elements and the joy of the occasion." His voice was gentle, yet his words, as always, carried a quiet, undeniable wisdom that seemed to bypass their superficiality entirely. Eleanor's smile tightened, a faint line appearing between her perfectly sculpted eyebrows. She hated that she could never quite make him squirm. Richard, growing bolder with the approving chuckles from his inner circle, decided to escalate. "Harmony, yes, a lovely thought, Mr. Vance. And speaking of harmony, we've arranged for an incredible lineup of entertainment later this evening. A famous jazz ensemble, a renowned classical quartet, the finest musicians money can buy. We spared no expense, of course. One wouldn't want the guests to be underwhelmed." He paused, his gaze fixed on Elias. "I trust you'll find it stimulating." The implication was clear. Would Elias, a man of humble origins, even comprehend such refined entertainment? Before Elias could respond, Eleanor leaned in conspiratorially, her voice dropping to a stage whisper, ensuring it was audible to the select group surrounding them. "And, of course, the gifts. Such a delightful tradition. We've been so touched by the generosity of our friends and family. Naturally, we've arranged for a rather substantial display area for all the tokens of affection. Though, of course, we understand that not everyone's contribution can be equally grand. A small, heartfelt gesture is sometimes just as meaningful, isn't it, Mr. Vance?" The small, heartfelt gesture was delivered with a dismissive wave of her perfectly manicured hand. a thinly veiled jibe at Elias's presumed humble wedding gift. The snickers from the small group of onlookers confirmed that her mockery had landed its intended blow. Liam, who had just approached, his face a mask of discomfort, heard the tail end of his mother's condescending remark. He winced, his hand tightening on Sophia's arm as she walked down the aisle, about to join him at the altar. Elias, however, remained unperturbed. He met Eleanor's eyes, a faint, knowing smile playing on his lips. "Mrs. B. Sterling, I assure you, Sophia's wedding gift will be one for the ages. It will be quite unforgettable, and I believe it will speak volumes, far beyond any monetary value." His voice was calm, almost serene, yet there was a quiet, unwavering conviction in his tone that made Eleanor momentarily pause. She searched his face for any hint of bravado, any sign of a bluff, but found only an inexplicable calm. Richard, recovering quickly, roared with laughter, a booming, dismissive sound that drew further attention. "Unforgettable! Oh, Mr. Vance, you truly are a character. I'm sure it will be most unique. We certainly look forward to seeing what marvelous keepsake you have prepared." The word keepsake was loaded with mockery, implying something sentimental, but utterly insignificant in their world of material opulence. Sophia, now standing beside Liam at the altar, caught her father's eye. He offered her a warm, reassuring smile, a silent message that he was all right, that he understood, and that she should focus on her happiness. The tension in the air, however, was palpable. The grand ceremony, designed to celebrate a union, had instead become a stage for the Sterlings to parade their wealth and subtly belittle Sophia's family. As the ceremony proceeded, and Sophia and Liam exchanged their vows, Elias stood quietly in the front row, his gaze fixed on his daughter, a profound love shining in his eyes. He felt the cold disdain emanating from the Sterlings, heard the lingering whispers about his perceived humble status, but he also felt a deep sense of purpose, a quiet anticipation. He knew their mockery was fueled by ignorance and arrogance, and he knew, with a certainty that had only deepened over the past weeks, that his wedding gift would not just be a gesture of love for Sophia, but a profound lesson for all those who judged worth by wealth. The stage was set, the audience was gathered, and the unsuspecting Sterlings were about to witness a revelation that would shatter their carefully constructed world of superficiality. The wedding reception, held in a grand ballroom adorned with cascading floral arrangements and shimmering silk, was a spectacle of wealth and influence. Guests, a constellation of Manhattan's elite, mingled with champagne flutes in hand, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings. Liam, though happy to finally be married to Sophia, found himself increasingly uneasy as the evening wore on. The tension between his parents and Elias Vance, while momentarily suppressed during the ceremony, lingered like an unspoken note in the luxurious air. Sophia, radiant in her gown, kept a vigilant eye on her father, her heart a mixture of joy for her marriage and anxiety for the subtle humiliations she knew were yet to come. Eleanor and Richard Sterling, seated at the head table, surveyed their domain with thinly disguised satisfaction. They had spared no expense, orchestrating an event that would be the talk of their social circles for weeks. Their glances frequently drifted towards Elias, who sat quietly at a table slightly removed from the main circle, engaging in polite conversation with distant relatives of Sophia. To the Sterlings, Elias's calm demeanor was not a sign of inner strength, but of an almost infuriating lack of ambition, a complete unawareness of the social strata they so meticulously upheld. The moment for the wedding gifts arrived, a tradition often used in these circles as another opportunity for subtle displays of power and generosity. The master of ceremonies, a suave event planner hired by the Sterlings, announced the segment with a flourish. "And now, ladies and gentlemen, a moment we've all been eagerly anticipating, the presentation of the wedding gifts." His voice boomed, amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system. Richard Sterling rose first, a confident, expansive smile on his face. He held a small, velvet-covered box. "Liam and Sophia, my dear children," he began, his voice booming with practiced theatricality. "Eleanor and I wish you a lifetime of happiness, prosperity, and the boundless joy that comes from building a powerful legacy. As a small token of our immense love and support, we present to you this, a gesture that we hope will help lay the foundation for your brilliant future. With a dramatic flourish, he opened the box to reveal a single, glittering key. This key, he announced, is to your new home, a fully furnished penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, a wedding gift from your loving parents. A collective gasp rippled through the room, followed by murmurs of admiration and applause. The sheer audacity of the gift, its blatant display of wealth, was exactly what the Sterlings intended. Liam, though genuinely touched by the gesture, felt a flicker of discomfort. Sophia, however, forced a grateful smile, knowing that rejecting such a lavish gift was simply not an option. Eleanor Sterling then rose, a smug smile on her face. "And from me, dear Sophia, as a welcome into our family, a piece of history." She held up a dazzling diamond necklace, its intricate design shimmering under the ballroom lights. "This belonged to my grandmother, a true matriarch. We hope it reminds you of the enduring power of family, and of the lineage you now become a part of." The necklace was undoubtedly antique, breathtakingly expensive, and clearly meant to signify Sophia's ascension into their world. The applause was even louder this time, a testament to the Sterlings' success in showcasing their immense wealth and influence. Liam and Sophia accepted the gifts, offering polite thanks, but the moment felt heavy, overshadowed by the overt displays of extravagance. Then, the Master of Ceremonies turned towards Elias Vance. "And now, we are honored to invite the father of the bride, Mr. Elias Vance, to present his gift to the happy couple." A ripple of low murmurs spread through the room. Many guests, having overheard the Sterlings' thinly veiled remarks throughout the evening, anticipated a stark contrast. Eleanor Sterling exchanged a knowing, contemptuous glance with her husband. Richard Sterling cleared his throat, a smirk playing on his lips, barely suppressing a chuckle. They leaned forward slightly, ready to witness what they presumed would be a small, perhaps sentimental, but ultimately insignificant offering from Elias. Elias Vance, unhurried and unfazed by the collective gaze, rose from his table. He walked with a quiet, unpretentious gait towards the front. In his hands, he held not a large, ribbon-wrapped box, nor a small velvet pouch. Instead, he carried a simple, unadorned wooden box, approximately 12 inches by 8 inches, crafted from what appeared to be dark, aged oak. It was plain, almost rustic, utterly devoid of the sparkle and flash that had characterized the previous gifts. A wave of barely suppressed snickers rippled through the Sterlings' close circle. Eleanor Sterling actually let out a small, derisive laugh, quickly covering her mouth with a gloved hand, her eyes gleaming with malice. Richard Sterling openly shook his head, a look of profound disappointment and condescension on his face. "Oh, dear," Eleanor whispered to Richard, just loud enough for a few surrounding guests to hear. "I knew he wouldn't be able to compete, but a wooden box. What on earth could possibly be inside? Perhaps a hand-carved birdhouse, or a collection of... well, who knows what a man like him might collect?" Her tone was sharp, mocking, cutting through the sophisticated hum of the room. Richard snorted. "Perhaps it's a family heirloom, dear. A treasured fishing lure, or a particularly sentimental stone from his quaint hometown. One must appreciate the thought, I suppose. However, modest." He made no effort to lower his voice, ensuring his disdain was clear. Sophia's face flushed. She squeezed Liam's hand, her eyes pleading with him to intervene, to stop the public humiliation of her father. Liam looked at his parents, his jaw tight, but he hesitated, caught between his desire to protect Sophia and his ingrained deference to his parents' authority. Elias, oblivious or perhaps simply indifferent to their open mockery, reached the podium. He placed the wooden box gently on the table. His eyes, calm and unwavering, met Sophia's, offering a silent reassurance. Then, he turned to Liam, a genuine warmth in his gaze. "Sophia, Liam," Elias began, his voice clear and steady, filling the room with an unexpected gravitas. On this joyous day, as you embark on your life together, I offer you a gift that is not measured in material wealth, but in something far more enduring. It is a gift of legacy, of foresight, and of the profound respect I have for the future you will build." He reached for the wooden box, his fingers tracing the simple grain of the wood. The Sterlings exchanged bewildered glances, their smirks faltering slightly at his serious tone. "This box," Elias continued, his voice gaining a quiet power, "contains something that has been carefully nurtured, protected, and grown over many years. It is a foundation, not of brick and mortar, but of something infinitely more valuable." With a slow, deliberate movement, Elias unlatched the simple brass clasp of the wooden box and lifted its lid. The guests craned their necks, their curiosity piqued. The Sterlings leaned forward, ready to scoff, ready to dismiss whatever humble trinket lay within. Inside the box, nestled on a bed of dark velvet, was not money, nor jewelry, nor a deed to a small, unassuming property. Instead, there were several crisp, official-looking documents, rolled and tied with a simple ribbon. Beside them lay a single, weighty, elegantly crafted pen, its silver gleam understated but purposeful. It was the only item that seemed to hint at any significant value. Elias carefully picked up the documents. "This," he announced, his voice resonating with an unexpected authority that commanded the attention of the entire room, "is the original patent for the Vance environmental bioremediation system." A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. "The what?" someone whispered. Eleanor and Richard Sterling exchanged bewildered glances. They had never heard of it. "And these," Elias continued, unrolling the documents, "are the deeds of ownership to the Vance Eco Research Holdings, LLC, a company that, until this very moment, has operated under a veil of strict privacy, dedicated to the development and implementation of this system." He held up the rolled deeds, their official seals prominent. "And this pen, a symbol of commitment, is for you, Liam, to sign the transfer documents." Silence, a profound, heavy silence, descended upon the ballroom. The snickers had died. The murmurs had ceased. Every eye was now fixed on Elias Vance, his calm demeanor suddenly imbued with an immense, unshakable power. The master of ceremonies, caught off guard, stammered, The Vance. What exactly is that, Mr. Vance?" Elias looked directly at Eleanor and Richard Sterling, a faint, almost imperceptible flicker of triumph in his eyes. "The Vance environmental bioremediation system," Elias explained, his voice clear and resonant, "is the patented technology that has quietly revolutionized large-scale industrial waste management and ecological restoration over the past decade. It utilizes a unique microbial composite capable of breaking down toxic pollutants at an unprecedented rate, transforming contaminated land and water into arable and habitable environments." He paused, letting the words sink in. The silence in the room was deafening. "The Vance Eco Research Holdings, LLC," he continued, "holds the global licensing rights to this technology. For the past 12 years, its revenue has been directed into a discrete trust, overseen by myself, dedicated solely to its research and development. It has quietly acquired, remediated, and sold hundreds of thousands of acres of previously unusable, polluted land across the globe, turning ecological disaster zones into thriving, productive real estate. And with each successful project, its value has multiplied exponentially." Then came the final, devastating blow, delivered with quiet dignity. "Today, as Sophia embarks on her new life, I transfer full and complete ownership of Vance Eco Research Holdings, LLC, and all its associated patents, assets, and future revenues to my daughter, Sophia Vance Sterling, and her husband, Liam Sterling. It is my wedding gift." The words hit the Sterling family like a physical blow. The silence was finally shattered by a collective gasp, a stunned intake of breath from every single person in the room. Eleanor and Richard Sterling, who had spent the entire evening mocking Elias's presumed poverty, now sat frozen, their faces pale, their eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief, shock, and dawning horror. The unassuming old man, whom they had so brazenly scorned, had just revealed himself as the quiet force behind an environmental and financial empire of unimaginable scale, dwarfing their own fortune with a single, astonishing act of generosity. A silence so profound it seemed to absorb all sound descended upon the opulent ballroom. It was the kind of silence that precedes a cataclysm, a moment where reality shifts, and everything previously believed is irrevocably altered. Eleanor and Richard Sterling sat frozen, their faces drained of color, their expressions oscillating wildly between disbelief, shock, and a dawning, terrifying horror. The murmurs that finally broke the quiet were not of admiration, but of utter astonishment, a low, incredulous hum that swelled into a deafening roar. The Vance Environmental Bioremediation System, a renowned industrialist whispered, his eyes wide. He's that Vance, the one who bought up all that polluted land in the Midwest and the vast tracts in the Amazon basin, the one who turned them into gold. Another prominent figure, a venture capitalist known for his ruthless acumen, stammered. Vance Eco Research Holdings. It's a ghost company. No public records. No discernible leadership. Everyone thought it was a consortium of major corporations, or perhaps even a sovereign wealth fund operating under extreme secrecy. He was behind it all. The sheer audacity of the revelation was staggering. The New York City elite, gathered to witness a display of sterling power, were instead witnessing the unveiling of a titan, a magnate of unprecedented wealth and influence who had deliberately operated in the shadows. Elias Vance, the unassuming old man in the simple suit, whom they had openly mocked, was revealed to be a visionary, an innovator, and a silent powerhouse whose empire dwarfed the Sterling fortune with ease. Eleanor Sterling's meticulously applied makeup seemed to crack. Her lips moved, but no sound emerged. She clutched at Richard's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his tuxedo sleeve. Richard, whose face had gone from crimson to an ashen gray, looked as if he might actually faint. His booming laugh, his condescending smirks, his entire carefully constructed facade of superiority had just been shattered into a million irreparable fragments. The small, humble gift he had joked about was, in fact, a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, a global force for environmental regeneration, and a financial juggernaut. Sophia, initially stunned, felt a surge of overwhelming emotion. Pride swelled in her chest, quickly followed by a pang of sadness for the years her father had endured silent judgment. She looked at Liam, whose initial embarrassment had morphed into pure awe, then a profound understanding. He knew instinctively that this was not a punitive gesture, but a profound act of love and trust from a father who had silently watched his daughter enter a world that initially scorned her. Elias Vance, meanwhile, remained utterly composed amidst the chaos he had unleashed. He picked up the elegant silver pen, his fingers steady, and handed it to a bewildered Liam. The transfer documents are all in order. Liam, legally binding, irrevocable. The lawyers will handle the rest. This is yours, and Sophia's, a future built on purpose and innovation. His voice was calm, almost gentle, devoid of any hint of vengeance or gloating. It was simply the quiet statement of a truth long concealed. Liam, still reeling, took the pen. His hand trembled slightly as he held the documents, his mind struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what had just transpired. His parents had built their legacy on old money, inherited wealth, and shrewd, often cutthroat business deals. Elias Vance had built his on a quiet genius, a revolutionary technology, and a commitment to restoring the planet. The contrast was stark, humiliating. The guests, once so eager to bask in the Sterling's reflected glory, now circled around Elias, their expressions a mixture of apology and eager curiosity. Whispers of "Mr. A. Vance, I had no idea," and a truly remarkable achievement filled the air. They scrambled to introduce themselves, to offer belated congratulations, to align themselves with this newly revealed titan. The social hierarchy of the room had been instantaneously, brutally inverted. Eleanor and Richard Sterling found themselves isolated, their table suddenly feeling like a desolate island. The very people who had chuckled at their snide remarks now avoided their gaze, some even openly staring with a mixture of pity and schadenfreude. The humiliation was absolute, public, and inescapable. Richard, usually so boisterous, was uncharacteristically silent, his face a mask of defeat. Eleanor, ever the more outwardly composed, gripped her champagne flute so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her perfect world had just imploded. Her carefully constructed image of superiority shattered by a man she had considered beneath contempt. "Richard," Eleanor whispered, her voice a strained hiss. "What have we done? He's Elias Vance, the quiet genius, the man who rebuilt the Amazonian rainforests with his bioremediation system, the one whose company was valued at trillions." Her voice broke, a raw note of despair entering her usually controlled tone. The magnitude of their misjudgment, their arrogance, their outright rudeness, now crushed them under its immense weight. Richard could only grunt, his eyes fixed on Elias, who was now engaged in a calm conversation with a world-renowned scientist, seemingly oblivious to the chaos he had created. Richard had spent his life judging men by their suits, their cars, their last names. He had never once considered that true power could be found in quiet humility, that true wealth could be built without public fanfare. His entire worldview had just been detonated. Sophia, observing her parents-in-law, felt a pang of unexpected pity amidst her triumph. Their faces were etched with such profound shame, such utter devastation, that even her anger began to subside. They had judged her father so cruelly, so relentlessly, but the universe had delivered its own, far more potent, judgment. Liam, however, felt a different kind of shift. He looked at his father, at his mother, and then back at Elias. He saw the stark contrast between his parents' superficiality and his father-in-law's deep integrity. The lesson was brutal, but undeniably clear. He had always admired Sophia's quiet strength, but now he understood its source. His love for Sophia deepened, interwoven now with a profound respect for the man who had raised her. He walked towards his parents, his expression firm. "Mother, father," Liam said, his voice quiet but resolute, cutting through the murmurs. "I believe you owe Mr. Vance and Sophia a profound apology, a public one." Eleanor and Richard flinched, as if struck. The idea of publicly apologizing to a man they had so openly scorned was anathema, a complete annihilation of their pride. But the weight of their humiliation, the shattering of their reputation, and the firm resolve in Liam's eyes left them with no alternative. They were no longer the ones holding the power. The unassuming Elias Vance had, with one simple wooden box, subtly but decisively, seized control of the entire narrative, leaving the Sterlings utterly, devastatingly stunned. The grand ballroom, moments ago a shimmering monument to the Sterling family's influence, now felt like a crucible of their public humiliation. The stunned silence had given way to a cacophony of whispers, their names repeated with a mixture of disbelief and barely concealed glee. Eleanor and Richard Sterling, trapped at their head table, felt the weight of every gaze, every hushed comment, every averted glance. Their carefully constructed world of status and superiority had not just crumbled. It had been atomized by a single, quiet revelation from the man they had openly scorned. "What are we going to do? Richard?" Eleanor's voice was a strained whisper, her usual steely composure completely shattered. Her face, usually so composed, was contorted with panic. "Our reputation, everything. This is worse than any financial scandal. We're a laughingstock." The realization that Elias Vance, the man they had dismissed as a commoner, was actually a titan of industry whose quiet wealth dwarfed their own, was a bitter pill to swallow. He wasn't just wealthy. He was revolutionary, a visionary who had transformed ecological dead zones into fertile land, building an empire on the very concept of restoration and sustainability, something far more profound than their inherited real estate. Richard Sterling, usually prone to bluster, was uncharacteristically silent. He stared at his trembling hands, the perfect picture of a man utterly defeated. He saw the looks of pity mixed with thinly veiled amusement on the faces of his peers, the very people whose respect he had cultivated for decades. He had always prided himself on his savvy, his ability to size up a man based on his appearance and connections, and he had been profoundly, spectacularly wrong. His arrogance had blinded him, leading him to publicly insult a man who held the keys to a fortune beyond his wildest dreams. Liam, his jaw tight, stood before his parents. He had given them a moment to absorb the shock, but his resolve was hardening with every passing second. He had seen the subtle torment Sophia had endured, the quiet dignity of Elias under relentless attack. This was not just about money, it was about respect, about character. There's only one thing to do. Mother. Father. Liam stated, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. You will apologize, not just to Mr. Vance, but to Sophia, and you will do it publicly, right here, right now. His eyes, usually gentle, held an unyielding demand. Eleanor flinched. A public apology, Liam. Are you mad? The humiliation. Our standing. Your standing is already in tatters, Mother. Liam cut her off, his voice sharper than she had ever heard it. You have mocked and insulted a man who is not only my father-in-law, but a genius whose achievements make our own look insignificant. You have shamed Sophia, and you have shamed yourselves. This isn't about saving face anymore. It's about decency. If you want any hope of repairing what little respect you have left, not just from these people, but from me, you will apologize, and you will mean it. Sophia, watching from a distance, felt a surge of pride for Liam. He was finally stepping up, choosing integrity over inherited arrogance. She saw the internal struggle etched on her in-laws' faces, the battle between their ingrained pride and the undeniable weight of their current humiliation. After a tense, agonizing silence, Eleanor Sterling, her shoulders slumped in defeat, slowly nodded. Richard, his face still pale, offered a grudging, almost imperceptible nod as well. The depth of their fall was evident in this silent capitulation. Liam stepped forward, taking a microphone from the bewildered master of ceremonies. The room quieted, sensing another dramatic turn. Liam's gaze swept over the crowd, then settled on Elias Vance, who watched calmly, his eyes unreadable. Ladies and gentlemen, Liam began, his voice clear, though tinged with raw emotion. My parents, Eleanor and Richard Sterling, have an important statement to make. He handed the microphone to Richard, who looked utterly miserable. Richard Sterling cleared his throat, his face a mask of profound discomfort. His usual booming voice was hoarse, almost a whisper. Mr. Vance, he began, addressing Elias directly, and Sophia, my wife and I, we wish to offer our deepest, most sincere apologies. He paused, visibly struggling to force the words out. We were wrong. Terribly wrong. We judged you, Mr. Vance, based on superficialities, on appearances, and on our own arrogance. He took a shaky breath. We made dismissive and insulting remarks, both privately and publicly, regarding your background, your choices, and your generosity. We ridiculed your gift, and we failed to see the true measure of your worth. We are truly, profoundly sorry for the disrespect and the humiliation we have caused. The admission was agonizing for him, every word a chipping away at his formidable ego. Eleanor then took the microphone, her hand trembling slightly. Her voice was thin, devoid of its usual sharp edge. Mr. Vance, she said, her eyes meeting his, I have been a fool. My pride, my snobbery, it blinded me. I made assumptions. I spoke with malice, and I subjected you to contempt that you did not deserve. You are a man of incredible vision, profound intellect, and immense integrity. We have learned a devastating but necessary lesson about true wealth and true character. We humbly ask for your forgiveness. Her voice cracked on the last word, the facade of the untouchable Eleanor Sterling finally crumbling. A collective sigh, almost a release of tension, swept through the ballroom. The public apology, raw and unvarnished, was far more impactful than any grand declaration of wealth. It was a testament to the power of humility, even when forced. Elias Vance, with his usual calm demeanor, slowly rose from his seat. He walked towards the podium, his presence radiating an almost palpable sense of quiet power. He took the microphone from Eleanor, his touch gentle. He looked at Eleanor and Richard, his eyes filled not with triumph, but with a deep, almost compassionate understanding. "Eleanor." "Richard," Elias said, his voice soft but clear, carrying through the room. "The measure of a man is not found in his mistakes, but in his willingness to acknowledge them. Your apology, given with such difficulty, is accepted." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "True wealth, you see, is not what one accumulates, but what one gives, and how one lives. And true respect is earned, not demanded." He then turned to the crowd, his gaze sweeping over the silent, attentive faces. "Let this day not be remembered for the arrogance of some, but for the union of two loving hearts, and for the lesson that true value, like true wisdom, often resides in the most unassuming of places." His words resonated deeply, a quiet sermon delivered in the heart of a grand celebration. The Sterling family, stripped of their pride, stood humbled, but with a faint glimmer of hope for redemption. The journey towards rebuilding their reputation, and more importantly, their character, had just begun, a path paved by the wise and magnanimous forgiveness of the man they had once mocked. The grand wedding reception, once a symbol of superficial grandeur and social hierarchy, was redefined in the aftermath of Elias Vance's revelation and the Sterling's public apology. What began as a display of arrogance transformed into a profound lesson in humility, integrity, and the true measure of a person. The air, once thick with tension, now carried a different resonance, a subtle shift towards understanding and genuine connection among the guests. For Sophia and Liam, the tumultuous unveiling cemented their bond in an unexpected way. Liam, initially caught between the ingrained snobbery of his parents and his deep affection for Sophia and Elias, had finally found his footing. Witnessing his father-in-law's quiet power and magnanimity, and his own parents' public downfall, had been a harsh but necessary awakening. He saw with clarity that true strength lay not in inherited wealth or social posturing, but in character, wisdom, and an unwavering moral compass. His respect for Elias deepened immensely, transforming into a profound admiration. He began to actively seek Elias's counsel, not just on business matters related to the vast new enterprise they now co-owned, but on life itself. Their marriage, forged in the crucible of public scrutiny and family drama, emerged stronger, built on a foundation of shared values and mutual respect. Elias Vance, having quietly delivered his impactful lesson, gracefully receded into his unassuming life. He continued to live in his modest home, preferring the quiet solitude of his studies and his passions to the glittering demands of high society. He ensured that Vance Eco Research Holdings, LLC, now under Liam and Sophia's joint leadership, remained true to its founding principles of environmental stewardship and sustainable innovation. While he remained a silent advisor and a guiding presence, he meticulously transferred the operational reins to the young couple, trusting them to carry forward the legacy of purpose over profit. His act of giving was not about demonstrating superiority, but about empowering the next generation with the means to create positive change in the world, unburdened by the very prejudices he had exposed. Eleanor and Richard Sterling faced a long, arduous road to redemption. Their public humiliation was swift and brutal, reverberating through their tightly knit social circles. Invitations dwindled, phone calls ceased, and the very people who once sought their favor now offered cold shoulders or polite avoidance. The initial shock gave way to bitter introspection. Stripped of their most potent weapon, their perceived superiority, they were forced to confront the emptiness of their arrogant worldview. It was a slow, painful process of deconstruction and rebuilding. With Liam's persistent urging and Sophia's compassionate, though firm, guidance, they began attending counseling sessions, learning to unpack their biases and confront the deep-seated pride that had dictated their lives. They started small, genuine acts of charity, not for public acclaim, but as a silent atonement. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in their lives, they were walking a path towards true humility and empathy, guided by the very man they had once mocked. The wedding, now infamous, became a story told and retold, morphing into a modern fable about the unexpected power of the unassuming. It served as a potent reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that true worth transcends material possessions. Elias Vance, the quiet man in the simple suit, became a legendary figure in his own right, a testament to the idea that the most profound wisdom often resides in those who least seek recognition. Years later, the Sterling family gathered for a quiet, intimate dinner at Elias's humble home. The grand chandeliers of the Astor Hotel seemed a distant, almost laughable memory. Eleanor and Richard, though still somewhat stiff in their demeanor, carried themselves with a newfound humility. They laughed genuinely at Elias's dry wit, listened intently to his observations, and even offered unprompted apologies for past slights that still pricked their conscience. Liam and Sophia, thriving both in their marriage and in their leadership of Vance Eco Research Holdings, sat across from them, their hands clasped. The company had expanded globally, becoming a beacon of environmental innovation and a testament to the power of a vision driven by purpose, not just profit. As the evening drew to a close, Richard Sterling looked at Elias, his eyes holding a depth of regret and respect they had never possessed before. "Mr. Vance," he said, his voice soft, "you gave us a wedding gift, not just of immense value, but of invaluable wisdom. We are still learning from it every day." Elias smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "The greatest gifts," he said, his gaze sweeping over his children and his now changed in-laws, "are those that open our eyes to the true richness of life. And that, my dear friends, is something no amount of money can buy." He remained the quiet, unassuming Elias Vance, the wise old man who preferred the simplicity of his garden to the opulence of boardrooms. But his legacy, etched not in marble, but in the transformed lives of a family and a thriving planet, resonated far beyond the confines of a single wedding. He had proven that true royalty resided not in crowns of gold, but in the quiet strength of character, the profound depth of wisdom, and the immeasurable power of a genuinely giving heart.